Hi there, thanks for joining. In this video I'll show you the painting process of this painting. And the main focus is on how you can build a painting from global to specific. So you can start with global color layers and you can get more specific in next layer. So it's also about working in layers. The nice thing about this method, in the end you can easily make choices. Where do I want extra detail or where do I don't want extra detail? But working this way can be a bit intimidating or scary for beginners because it takes a long time before your painting starts looking like a painting. And so you go through all kinds of very ugly phases. Most of the times when you have global color layers and it looks ugly, then with a little bit of tweaking with extra layers, it starts looking like a real painting very quickly. So the trick in the end is to try and stay a little bit confident, and that is very hard when you look at an ugly painting in the early stages. I know that as well, it's still sometimes hard, but the more you paint and the more you dare to do this, the more you will build your confidence that it will get right in the end. And to quickly skip the sketching phase, I just use a beamer in this case. Because the goal for this painting is not to become more accurate in sketching, I'm more interested in the painting process this time. I make a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And then I use some acrylic primer and extender. It's just to make the acrylic paints more fluid and a little bit transparent so that I keep my sketch. Let me first mix these two colors. It is just to make a kind of a grayish kind of color. It isn't the final color, nowhere near that. So I just use some of this extender stuff and I mix that, and then you see it gets lighter because this color, is a milky kind of color, but in the end it will dry transparent. So then I test on a certain part and I see it's a little bit too dark still. So, because I cannot see my sketch anymore, so I just add a little bit more. But I just want to get rid of the white of the canvas. But I also want to preserve my sketch. Let's look how this is holding up. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Then I just grab a big brush, a general house painter's brush, and I quickly cover my sketch. So this is a house painter's brush that is suitable for acrylic paints, for when you paint your house. And you see, I think you can maybe hardly see on the camera, but now my canvas gets a little bit grayish, bluish dark, but I still can see my sketch. And also the brush marks, etc. I don't mind that too much. It is just a base layer of paint. It also seals the pencil. When you paint over pencil, the graphite of the pencil will solve a little bit in the paint, so your paint will get a little bit gray. And when I put the first layer on top of that graphite, then the graphite sticks in the acrylics. So in next layers the graphite won't pollute my colors anymore. With this camera I can show you that I, from my viewpoint, can still see the sketch lines, you see? So now I'm gonna leave this to dry, so meanwhile I can clean my brush, the palette, and I can take some coffee, and after that I'm gonna paint. First thing I'm gonna do is I am gonna fill in these dark spaces and the light spaces of the windows. And I don't necessarily want to do the right colors at the first go, but it's just to make a division between light and dark in the background. So again, to make a dark color, I'm first gonna use ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And another thing that we need is titanium white to indicate the light spots. And maybe it isn't that bad of an idea to do that first. Here is a light pole and that has a light side that tapers a little bit like this. These windows
I just put a little bit of this light titanium white here. And of course they are colored, but at this moment I just put a base color. And it goes like this, and like this. That neon light over here. This is all a kind of orientation phase. Now I just use a chair because I need to stretch my arm too much, and I can lower the easel, but with filming that is hard because I've installed the palette over here. Then I see a light kind of thing around here. Over here is another light. Well, it doesn't really matter that much, of course. And sometimes a photograph like this can look very challenging. How are we going to approach it? And it's just a matter of jump into it, try things, and then slowly but steadily the painting will evolve. There are always things that you can do at this moment. Even very small steps like this are helpful. I'm gonna sketch this line in as well. This is of the bus stop. In the roof of the bus stop, there you have a dark line because there it is a little bit open, but from here you get a very light reflection of this light in the roof, of course. So that gets reflected on the glass roof. See? And then I also indicate a little bit of these lines that I see, like this. So here are lights, here, here, here. And then here again we have a sort of, at this level, we have a little bit of windows, a little bit of these horizontals, and this I do a little bit freely, as long as I make sure that the distances between the rows of windows is a little bit the same. So that's good. Now let's head over to the lights over here or everywhere. So here we have a traffic light, here we have light, light, light. Here we have all kinds of lights going like this. These lights are important to me because the woman sticks out very nicely, because this is very dark. So we see this part of the jacket very clearly. And here you see these red lights is a little bit of a sort of horizon feel. And that's very important in the composition, that part. You see, so this is a kind of what I said, sort of horizon kind of feel. Okay, now I'm gonna mix a dark color to block in the dark parts. And again, I'm gonna use burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And then we have that other lamppost over here. Oh, by the way, if you want to make straight lines, just use a flat brush, or an angled brush like this is also good, but put it perpendicular to your canvas and just from your shoulder drop a line down like this. So you can move your whole shoulder and just do this. Okay, so now I head over to this dark mixture and I'm gonna fill in the gaps. So it's just a matter of filling in the gaps. From here on the building becomes a little bit more red due to all the reflected lights from the street area, etc. So there I'll stop and we fill that in with a more red color later on. And I just paint around the light areas. You have to dare a little bit to build a painting like. And that's also, it's a matter of taste, what you like most in the end, so you can try that as well. This method that I like to use is to just work from global to specific. That's the process. We start very global with global color layers, global sketch lines, and the farther we get into the painting, the more specific we get. I'll keep her head. So like that, and over here it starts getting more pink reddish. So here I go a little bit like this. So maybe it's good that in this moment with my video editing program I'll show how this works out later on, because now it looks really weird and scary, but see what happens later on. So just try to continue, because everything will be alright in the end. So here is a nice line like this. There's a dark part over here that I drop in, and then from here I've indicated that in my sketch as well. You see all kind of darkness. I really don't know what it is. If I look closely, I think there's something there on the pavement, maybe some plants or something. Whenever I cannot see clearly what it is, I also don't have to bother to paint it. So, I mean, I see a dark area, that's all I see. So I stop thinking about it. That's very good for me, because I don't have enough brains anyway to think. So the photograph, the original photograph, is more towards a square format, and I've made it a little bit more like a rectangle. And then you see that the pavement stops at the far right over there, outside of my picture. But maybe I would like to end the pavement on my picture over here. Why not? I just reduce the size of the pavement a little bit. So and I try to make the correct perspective lines. So this perspective line I have, so this one needs to taper a little bit towards that line. And if you want to learn more about perspective, I've made a full perspective course on Patreon. Now, and then, well, that I'm at it here, this vase, or whatever what it is, has a very dark bottom here. And so I can indicate that as well. I just like it to use the colors that I still have on my palette, so I don't need to get to throw them away. We drop in the blue part. Maybe I can also draw a little bit of these drop shadows already, so the woman here also has some drop shadows over here. And you see these different, and usually with one light source, of course, you have only one drop shadow, but she gets lit from all kinds of places, from that light, from this light, so therefore she has a drop shadow over here, but light bounces from here back to her, and from street lights, etc, etc. So she has several cast shadows. I said drop shadows, I meant cast shadows, I'm sorry. So that reminds me that I also need ultramarine blue and burnt umber. So that's my shopping list. Then we have cast shadow here a bit, and over here it's just all dark. I'm gonna add red, and I don't know how much I need, I'm just gonna try. Here we have that building over here, and in front of that building is here some other stuff that's going on, and I can't exactly see what, but I think that's another building, and that building gets lit by red lights a little bit more of the city. I think, but it could also be that it is a sort of billboard or something. I really don't know, and by the way, I also don't care. And down there it gets darker again. Then I add slightly more white to that mixture, and here as well. We don't mind, we can put other colors on top of that later on. I will do a little bit of the darkness again, also over here, but with a little bit more of red color. So, and you see, because this color is rather dark, I can easily put it next to that dark color, and you see that it already starts to blend of its automatically on its own. But if I want to blend it more, I just, with this color on my brush, I go over to the dark color, and I can mix the two together a little bit, like this. This dark part, I'll do that quickly with this dark color, but then I go upward, I add a little bit of this dark reddish kind of strange color. Like this, up till the, oops, where is her arm? I've destroyed her arm, I think, yes. So I've restored her arm. I hope she didn't mind. So there we go, a little bit of that red stuff over there. Okay, and then I'm gonna head over to this color again. I'm adding a little bit of white. I see it on the building a bit. Here it's all rather vague. We cannot quite clearly see what's happening over there. So I just put in that color like this and this. Here I'm just gonna add, that I already told you, that is very red. That light over there. And then here we have more pinkish kind of color. So I just add white to the pearl red and I'm gonna drop in a little bit like this. And you see I've mixed on purposely a little bit sloppy on purpose, because then I get a little bit of this glowing effect automatically. And I'm gonna add that on top of that thing over there as well. And here I still have to fill in a little bit of this stuff. It's all a matter of trying to dare to let the paint do its job, so to speak. So that you just dare to indicate some things a little bit, but you suggest things that are happening. Then I use a little bit of pure red, and now I just make one sort of shape of red glow like this. And later on we will make it more round. Then I start heading over to the windows of that flat over there, and there you see more kind of orangey, light orange colors. So what do we need to make orange? A little bit of yellow. Now, no problem. Red and yellow. These windows have variations of very light and slightly darker orangey kind of colors. So I add just a little bit of titanium white to this part, and here I leave a little bit of that darker mixture. So I have 2-3 variations, that's more than enough. Like this. A yellow like this. A little bit sloppy. That's on purpose. You can say that always. Whenever you do something not very good, you say, oh, I did it sloppy on purpose because I'm an artist. When something is sloppy and not well done, it is artistic. So, you see, there we are. Now I start adding very light colors. I just do it like this. Quickly drop it on top of what I did previously. Well, and some windows I leave. So this kind of strange color that I've used for over here, I'm gonna drop it in at some windows. So let me do that with this one, for instance. Here a bit like this, maybe it's of one family. Now these windows over here. Strangely enough, I think it's more of an office building or something, but they are more bluish. Now, that's also no problem. I'm gonna take a little bit of cyan. I'll use this light color over here and I'll mix a little bit of that cyan in it, like this, to get a light sort of color for here. See? Oh, I draw over the lamppost now. That's no problem, I can put in the lamppost in later on. And then I say, aha, I see variations, so I can use a little bit more of this light stuff and mix that through it. And then, for instance, I see some windows over here are slightly lighter in this vertical section. So I go down, here are all dark windows, but here again it's light. At the side here, and I find that interesting, a little bit more cyan kind of windows. So I add a little bit more cyan to that mixture that I already had. So let me do that as well. See, there we go. And I see slight indications of windows over here. But then I grab that dark color, I mix that a little bit. In rooms where the lights are not turned on. Here the pavement bends this way now, and then over there, it will go that way. And because I've made it smaller, so also that dark thing that I see there, I make smaller as well. So I do a upright line like this. And then I do something like this, just to, yeah, it's just suggestion work, but you see, now I get a sort of form like this, that's more pleasing as a composition. Here, for instance, I see very light lines, like that. I'm gonna make the centers of that red lights, those red lights, I'm gonna make orange. So I have red here, I add a little bit of yellow and a little bit of white. I already make a little bit of round centers, because these white lighter dots give the impression and make it easier to make it look shiny. There we go. And now I want to show you how ugly my painting looks when you see it from my perspective. And maybe also you already find it ugly on the camera. That's also very possible. But I want to show you just to make you feel comfortable. When you stand with your nose on the painting while you're painting, it really looks very ugly. You see, this is what we have so far. It really is very ugly. And that is good. I've taken a brief break. Or brief, a whole weekend. Then we have a fresh look, and we can continue with our painting. So I bought new paints, as you see, and new brushes as well. And I've brought a tomato, because I saw this in the morning and I wanted to make a video about painting a tomato. But I need titanium white, and the other colors are just in stock. Ultramarine, whoops, cyan, Pyrrole red, oops, cat yellow medium. Well, let's pre-mix some main colors. So I want to start with the pavement, I think. A little bit of cyan, yes, and then a little bit of white as well. More upwards, it gets a little bit more burnt umbery. Because burnt umber is close to a dark version of red or orange. First I add a little bit extra of red, then I add a slight touch of white. Then you see that this color gradually shifts towards a cyan kind of the pavement that contains a lot of blue kind of color. I start with cyan. So I add a little bit of red to dull it down slightly. So I add a slight touch of white as well to lighten the color a little bit. And then it lightens up towards the bus stop. I make a new pile with a little bit of cyan over here and titanium white. And then I do the same thing. I'll add a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. And you can also add, so the trick with dark scenes like this is that whenever you see a lighter color, it quickly looks, it seems to be very light, but in reality sometimes it still is relatively dark. When you don't want to get fooled, then just try to look in the photograph for the parts that you know that are absolutely the lightest light in this photograph. And so for instance here, in that advertising space, there's a very light color that's almost white, and the light itself on top here, for instance, is very light. And of course the lights here in the backgrounds are also very light. And these colors are way lighter than the light on the pavement. So try not to make the mistake to make this too light. You might be tempted to do that, but in reality it's rather dark still. I first start with that more burnt umbery kind of color, because we see a dark space over here a bit, and just use it a little bit freely. You don't have to do everything completely right. Clean the brush a bit, then I head over to this one and I mix the two a bit together like this. then I have a transitional value and color for these two colors. So it will make my life easier when I want to make a soft blend. So you see here already, I just dropped the color on top of both colors. And then you see that blending just happens automatically. Then again, I wipe the brush clean a bit. And then I can also do that here, because the most light part is over here, I think. See? So it's ever so slightly, but it is a nice kind of detail. And between her legs, what do we see between her legs? Also a little bit of the pavement, yes. Now, and from here on, we get this more darker color, this one. I mix it with the previous colors that I've used here. See, so I get a value and a color in between. So I can easily blend these colors together, because I've made that in between value, you see. Then we head over to the darker version. So I take a little bit still of this, but I'll keep it more to the color that I already had, and I put it here on the side, for instance. It contains more blue. And so more of that cyan stuff. I just put this color over here, and then I say, okay, I just make that general gesture that I see of that this all gets slightly darker and more blue. There we go, and here in the foreground as well. I make this general kind of shape. Now the lighter parts here. Therefore, for that I have made pre-mixed a light color as well already. Yeah? So here at the side I see that a little bit. I don't blend yet, I just put this color in, and blending I'll do shortly. First I'll do this. So the general shape that I see of rather light color is like this. Now I'm going to connect it to the surroundings by using the previous mixture and mix the two a little bit together. So now I've got a value in between this one and that darker one. Put this one here, for instance, and here, and now I wipe the two together a bit, and also here, you see, you get a nice soft glow. I keep the brush on the canvas and just wipe the two together. Then I head over to the roof. Now, and that's a bit of a transparent looking kind of roof. And I see the same kind of color a bit in the surroundings of the very light reflections. So a bit like that. And then I grab a little bit of white quickly, and I put a new layer on top of this, and then I wipe it a bit in that still wet blue paint. So now, for instance, when you look, you see these transparent parts, then you see a kind of color that looks similar to this one. If I mix that with that light bluish color, a bit of these kind of colors, I think. I drop reasonably light horizontals on top of this again. Of course, we see parts of that dark building shine through that transparent roof. Now let's head over to the colors for that billboard. As a base, I would say I have a dirty brush, I don't mind. I just put the cyan over here with a dirty brush. Then I make it a little bit more greenish, a little bit lighter as well. So here is the front one. And now this is a bit too green and too blue, but I don't mind, I can adjust that later, but it is just for the idea to recover the sketch. This is a bit sloppy, sorry. So like that. So, mistake made, no problem. because I can, with a wet paper towel, I can erase my mistake, because the previous layer is dry. So there you go. And again, I do that from the shoulder and I just let the brush do the work. Then we have a horizontal again. I grab a lot of white, put that in the same mixture. Now, of course, I have here this circle. I want to preserve that a bit for the sketch. That I keep a little line so that I can remember, oh, there a bit was the circle, you know? So, and well, then it gets light, etc., etc. So I leave that. The top of the bench over here, I use the same kind of color just to make it stick out. And the bus sign over here has this kind of color here as well. Up till here it is dark. I'm so sorry. Sometimes when painting and talking, you forget the most obvious things. But yeah, that's life. It takes a bit of concentration, eh? Talking and painting at the same time. So, I wipe the brush a bit clean and then I take titanium white. Well, I'm just first gonna add a white layer just to make this canvas at those spots light. And of course, there are all kinds of things going on there with the image on that billboard. But at this moment, I don't care. But the thing is, when you approach a painting in this fashion, working in big planes first and then go to more specifics, the benefit is that you can very easily allow yourself to choose, to make choices later on. How detailed do I want this sign to be in the end? Now I don't know yet, because at this moment I haven't done the other things. But maybe later on, when I've done the lady, maybe I think, oh, I don't need to do that billboard anymore, I just keep it like this. I mean, I don't think so, but it could be. And you never know. Now I see that I've made that circle way too big. That's another error, so I quickly try to correct that. You know what? Don't be scared, just wipe the whole thing a bit away, like this. So, there we are. And then over here it's a little bit lighter, so I add a bit more white. A lighter color at some spots here, so that the poster is a little bit bubbling. And I do a light line on top of this bar here, you see, so like this. So I remove this because I cannot use that anymore. These other piles are still a little bit wet, because those are piles of paint, and piles of paint take way longer to dry. And I want to drink a little bit of coffee, but first I want to do a global wash of color on the woman. First, with a smaller round brush, I'm gonna drop in some very dark shadows or dark spots, because to have some landmarks, that's great. This strap of the bag, that's on her back. That's a very dark part. And then you have the, how you call it? This thingy to protect you from the rain. And that's also a dark line. This goes like this. So then we have a rather pronounced fold of that elbow, of that arm going like this. The other arm, same story, that's over here, and then at the side you see a very nice curved line like this. Over here you see a very dark area, a very dark line, because cast shadow, that jacket prevents light from hitting there, so it is rather dark. I just look at the dark shadow area, I just look at the shape of the dark shadow area, and then I see a shape like this. And they don't have to be the right colors, never mind, that's no problem. That's for later. So later on we can try to make it look better. Then I leave that to dry a little bit. Meanwhile, I'll start adding a bit of orange. But there's only a very small part where it is actually orange. And that is, I'll show you, a bit over here and here. There it is rather orange. But to the right it gets lighter, and we can make the color lighter with a little bit of white, and I also add a little bit more yellow. But it is just to make a clear division, because the light hits here, the top of the head a bit, and over here, and then over here. So it is a very general shape that I built here. Shadow parts in orange, what color do we get? Brownish kind of colors. And how do we achieve that? Well, you can take a brown color, for instance, as a base, but you can also do orange and add a little bit of cyan, for instance, blue. Then you have 3 primaries, and see what happens. You get a brownish kind of orange. Put that color over here, and you see that's a bit of a problem. That local color orange didn't cover that well, because it was a transparent color. So that has gone. But in the next layer I can add that again. But there are even darker areas in the head, and there you see a kind of, when you look closely, that is a sort of burnt sienna kind of brown. Red, yellow, then we get orange. We add a bit of, how you call it, cyan. So I can drop that in here, but the paint is still wet, but it's just to have my sketch back a bit. You see? So I don't mind that the colors aren't correct. It's just the start of something. The hair has to the right a lighter side again, and to the left it's darker. I make some very dark lines over here. This is way too dark what I do over here all the time, but it is a foundational layer, so we can drop those lighter colors on top of that later on. So try not to worry that it looks ugly and strange. You cannot do everything at once. I have to stand a bit in an awkward position, but I try to see what I do. So then I head over to that other shoe, and then we look at the bottom of her, the sole of the foot. So it goes like this. Here is a little bit wide, then it gets slightly narrower, and it goes a long way up till here, I guess. So like this. This goes a little bit straight down, and then over here it gets slightly wider, and then over here it drops down a bit more, like this. So global shape. We've brought the global shape back, and then the top, the heel of her shoe over here, I do slightly lighter, just with the light gray. I don't care, it's not correct. The canvas is gray. I want to give this a bit of a base layer color, and luckily I have cyan, and cyan is a nice base color for the whole jacket, and cyan is a bit of a transparent color. So therefore this first layer is useful to already have one layer of this cyan color, so the gray gets covered a little bit more already, you see? And to the right side her arm gets very light, so just to return my sketch as well a bit, I just drop in a little bit of white over there. But for instance here on her hips the jacket is a little bit more like this, and here it's slightly lighter to the side. So you can already, and over here is also a little bit lighter, so a sort of kind of simple indication of where light hits her a bit more. But of course, the other way around, you also have darker parts. But now let's continue to her legs, and light gets thrown on that. So I just use this light mixture that I have here. It's over here a bit, and this. Now I add slightly more white, and I go over to the other leg. And then at the side, light gets cast on the side of her leg, and over here it bends a bit like this, it curves a little bit like this, and then the rest of her legs are rather dark. So I use a little bit of cyan, I add a little bit of red So then it becomes a little bit more grayish and a little bit more dark. So a bit of red and a bit of cyan. And there we go. In general, the logic of the woman is already there, so to speak. Just grab a large brush and they use this color now a little bit to, at some spots, do that on top of what there's already there, you see, and that gives it a little bit of mysterious look. And so the layers are going to play together. And then I see downwards over here, it gets a little bit more magenta-like. I've got a lot of magenta over here, so no worries. And now, again, this is why it's handy to know about transparent and opaque pigments, because I know that magenta is a transparent pigment. So that means that if I put it on top of a layer, then the previous layer will shine through. So here I do a little bit of magenta downwards, and you see what happens. It is transparent, so it doesn't cover completely, so I can play with that color. So at some parts I put a little bit more of magenta, and at some parts I don't. So here I can do that as well, why not? I just want to try things and make a sort of abstraction of that background. And some spots I'm gonna add a little bit of white to the magenta. So very slightly. Then of course it becomes more opaque. But let me do a bit like this. And over here I just drop it in the still wet paint. See? I look at the photo, I use it a bit as inspiration, but for a big part I just let it happen a bit. It is a little bit of abstraction. Over here a light and here. So I make a kind of orangey kind of color. Oh, a bit of yellow, a little bit of red. And I'm gonna paint that around the edge of the lamps, of the lights. And then I quickly use, for example, this color at the sides. You see, like this. So you get a little bit of a soft feel around these lanterns, these spots, these lights. And then we have all these beautiful lights. Now, at some spots we can add a bit of extra light inside. Take a very light color, and then at some of these lights I want to add a lighter center. A little bit. Not everywhere. So I think maybe one here, over here again. When you add a new layer, it looks a little bit more random and a little bit more playful. These layers start working together a bit more. Let's do some magenta with a little bit of white. With a bit of that, then you get a pink color because that is magenta. Then I do more magenta on the sides. There we go. And then I do a little bit of glow magenta again. I let it pour down a bit like this. Slowly but steadily, I think it gets more playful here in the background. Yeah, and then here, this dark zone, that didn't cover that well the first layer. No problem, I have this color called burnt umber, and I add a little bit of red, so it gets more of a red brownish kind of color. And I'm gonna put that on top of this. So, and again, you see how nicely that brownish kind of color connects with the reds that we've put on top there. And that is logical because it does actually connect, because red has a connection with brown. So that is logical, but yeah. Now we've given everything a global color layer, and I don't know how it's gonna work out in the end. At this moment I think there need to be a lot of refinement still in the background. But I cannot see that clearly because the woman in the foreground is of course the main subject in our painting. And only when I've detailed her a little bit more, and maybe the billboard and stuff like that, and the foreground here, only then can I see what needs to happen with the background. Now we can divide the jacket into three main colors, so to speak. A dark color for the shadows, then mid-tones, so a lighter color, and the lightest color for the lightest part. So if we make these three values, then we can go a long way. I initially thought I would make 3 values, but 4 is great as well. And here you have these folds that make for these kind of shapes. I said I was going to paint the jacket, and what am I doing? I'm not painting the jacket, I'm painting the trousers. I'm so sorry. When I am very honest, when I paint on my own, I jump all over the place in the painting. And I do it on intuition. I think, oh, now I need to do this, now I need to do that. But of course, when I want to make a painting lesson, I should be a little bit more structured. Now I take this dark blue color, so now I head over to the jacket as promised, finally. And I put in a dark blue at this side, just to make that division clear. This is dark, that is light. And there's a transition in between, but I leave that for now. I first do the general shapes. Dark at the bottom of the hood a bit, and the rest of her sleeve here is slightly lighter, but I just first put in this dark. And oh yeah, here is nice, that beautiful fold, that's slightly darker. And then we go downwards like this. I would say just give it a general shape. And then the mid-tone I'm gonna put to the sides of that dark stuff. So a bit, I don't mind the connection yet. You know me by now, but over here is a bit of mid-tone. So over here it gets lighter, I think. And here is a bit mid-tone on the edge. Then we go over here. I do this color as well, and you see here I make a bit of a transitional color between those two, because this is a little bit dark. So you see now I can lighten up the inside of that fold a bit like this. So I'll just put in this color. I'm gonna go over to the lighter value. So to the side over here, and we can do a bit like this, a bit of these brush strokes like this. Then you sort of indicate the type of jacket that it is. So this gets slightly lighter. Here it's slightly darker towards the belt of the strap. And then here it gets lighter, lighter, lighter. For me now easiest to connect the lightest parts with the mid-tones a bit by mixing a value in between those two. And connect. So you see, I just gradually build. And here again, there is a slightly darker as well. Here I can add a little bit of the mid-tone value, I think. Yes, okay. Or I make a transitional color like this and blend the two easily together, no problem. And you can also do that when the paint is already dry. That really doesn't matter. And here, this is also a little bit too hard. So this dark color over here is a bit too extreme, but I don't mind that. But I lighten it up slightly with the mid-tone, so I have a value between these two, and do that over here in between. See? Same goes, this area is dark. I make a slightly lighter variation of this dark paint again with that paint. And then in that shadow area we have at the edge that we see a bit of lighter, so I do it like this. And now the fun starts, because now I can, it was already fun of course, but now I can add more details. For instance, the lightest part. So I head over to this very light color now. And on the hood, for instance, I see a little bit of light over there. That's a little bit too much what I do now, but okay. But here on the side of her jacket, you see, and sometimes on top of these folds, you see very light. But you see again, this is light, but not white. Now, then I can go for some extra light. I add a little bit more white to this mixture. Here at some parts I see it, like doing things like this and like this. So you see, you can easily build. And you have already put the base layers, and you can put these kinds of things on top of it. And I see those details like that dark blue line. This is a lighter part in the jacket, so the darker parts I do a slightly darker, but not the darkest value that I have. They are a bit darker than what is already there. But for instance here, everything is a little bit darker here. So these lines get darker as well. It gives a little bit of that shape. Here for instance, and you have that the bottoms of these rectangles, these are rather dark. So darker than what is there. So that is the way I think about it. And going upwards here as well, there they get way darker. And so here in this fold, then we have the folds over here that catch a bit of light at the edge. I make this very dark. And this part over here, so over there. Yes, this is all the dark zone. There we go. Now, then I can start lightening it up a bit, and I just do that with pure cyan. So like this, I add that to the still wet paint. You see, now at the side, I start at the side here, so I just add that, and now I wipe it through the still a little bit wet paint, and I look at the shape on the photograph. The shape of that light area. So this is a bit light over there, and this is a bit light. Oops, there I went through the still wet paint. I don't think it's that big of a problem, but here of course the black turns like this, and then here it gets darker, so we'll grab that darker color again. Up till there, and then go over here. Yes, and then here it gets rather dark. Okay, so I use a little bit of this dark mixture again, and I paint that on top of this. Quickly blend it a little bit. More to the left is the darkest part, so I add more black to the mixture. Make this very, very dark. And then to the left, it gets a little bit lighter again. Still dark, but lighter. So something like this, I think. That is because light bounces back into the shadow part. Hair. So we already have a very dark value. Then we can look at slightly lighter value. I take a little bit of burnt umber and I mix it through this dark mixture, so it gets slightly lighter. There are zones where I just put this slightly lighter color. Okay, now I mix a color for the slightly lighter parts. Well, mainly at this side, some of these things of the hair are slightly lighter. And here as well in the dark zones, there a bit. And then we head over to an even lighter color. So I add way more white here on top. And so here are the main parts where there is, at some spots, more of that very light color. And when we turn more to the left, it gradually becomes darker. Yeah, okay, so for this part, now you see that finally it starts looking a bit more orangey, huh? Because now the color starts covering. Okay, so that was the lightest part already. Then we go, the middle part. Then we go to the right, and there it gets more yellowy, but also more white. So I added more yellow. I also added more white. There we go. See, now I can start to connect. I can build. And now we go to the right. It gets progressively lighter. So I just add more white, a lot of white. But still it contains yellow and red. So I hope that now a little bit light that it starts looking as though light is hitting her from that side. I take red, yellow and a little bit of cyan. Do I still have it somewhere? Yes, I have. For the shadow on the head. Here again, here a bit, here a bit. But there's one thing I want to do that's very, very nice. You have that halo effect, especially on the left side of her head. There you see that halo effect. Then there's a little bit of a pinkish kind of color. So I take a little bit of magenta and a bit of white. And I grab a very small brush, a round brush. See, this is a very tiny, strange kind of detail, but I think the effect is very, very funny. I can do that around here as well a bit, on top of her hair. Here it is that a bit as well, and to the left side especially. So hair, I just do it a bit like this. And it makes her stick out a little bit more. Now you see we get in a different phase of the painting. Because now it's time to look at the total picture of the painting and say, okay, where do we need to add more detail and where do we need to add less detail? What I do like on the photograph and what I do not like on my painting is that these windows are a little bit more subtle. So can I reduce them a little bit? Is that better? I think so. And to the left I need to do that as well. These middle parts I don't mind too much, but over here it is a little bit too light to my liking. Now let me add a little bit of the drawing on that billboard. So first I'm gonna draw that circle. Now that is a bit... Now let me draw the T that I see. This scene is taking place in Warsaw, if I see it correctly. Then I see a little bit of a building. I still have some cyan here. You see how messy my palette looks? You see, that's a nice building, like that. Here another building indicated. As long as it looks a little bit like advertisement, then I'm already satisfied. And I see a bit of grey stuff over here, a bit over here, and on this line everything seems to evolve like this. The bus roof itself is white and then there are some trees or something around. Now it has got some wheels, because otherwise it cannot drive. There are 3. I want to make the shadows of this spot very dark, especially here to the side. This I just do with black. Here I use a bit of black. These shadows are really, really dark. Oops. So I see something like this. Make this very dark as well.
Okay, so I've got a little bit of a cold, so my voice sounds strange. But now we're in the last phase of the painting process. And now it's just up to us to decide where do we want more detail or where do we want to reduce detail. Because there's one spot that bothers me, and that is those windows. So I'm looking for a way to attract the attention more towards this zone of the painting. And now at this moment you get distracted by these windows. So I'm gonna dim them down a little bit. That sounds great, isn't it? And that's the first thing I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna do these poles again, etc. I'm gonna, well, adjust some things a little bit. Also, I think that the sky overall is a little bit dark, so I'm gonna do something about that. More upwards, I'm gonna leave it nearly black, but more downwards, I want to make it slightly more blue. So rather dark, but slightly more blue. I think that would be fun. Maybe it is great to even add a little bit of cyan over here. I'm just gonna try. I just drop in a slight touch of cyan. See, so I build, and here I add extra. I'm gonna make some dark zones here as well, because that is, I think that will be nice. But this, you see that these steps are all very easy to do because we have all those foundational layers. I can also do a little bit of detail like objects like this over here. I'll add some more indications of lights over there. This one I want to make a little bit extra light on top. Oh yeah, that's another thing that you often see, of maybe encounter. The more you get to the end of the painting, the smaller the brushes get. And because you're getting more into the details. You see those dark dots. And then over here I'm gonna put some of that, then. So it's just detailing work at this moment. The top of this edge I can make light, because light hits the top of that, that thing. So here it gets slightly darker. This, by the way, is a little bit too hard. Let's add a little bit less light. Oops. Now I'm messing up. Oops. Oh, maybe when I do it like this it is good. Yes, this, see? So sometimes the happy little accidents, huh? And just try to mimic letters, you see? And then some indications of details of that back screen of the bus stop. And drop down a line here in the darkness. Now, because you have a little bit of backlight going on here, this bar gets a little bit darker. And now I'm gonna overlap that sign again. Okay, look, if I make it a little bit more dark here in the foreground, we get a bit more sucked into the composition. So I'm gonna do that here slightly as well. So I'll just make it a little bit darker here in front. Now, the thing is, these poles, I don't like them. They are too light. Grab. Here on the ground, I want to make a part that is extra light. That small spot over here a bit, like this. I think in the end it gets more shiny, but at this moment it is just a light dot on the ground. That is because it is not connected to the surroundings, so I'm gonna mix a little bit of the surrounding color. And I do like this. So at the edge I make it more cyan already. And then I add even more cyan. And see what happens. Now it gets connected to the color that's already there. At some spots you see that light hits in. Light hitting this way lightens up the joint at this side. Same goes for here. So I don't have to draw every tile, but by indicating some of these joints, a bit like that, and here maybe a horizontal one, like that. And the other way around, by the way, there are also darker joints, so I'm getting to that as well. With a slightly darker joint color, and here as well. One long cast shadow like this is also fun to do, so I see that over there. So over here, brownish, I would say, so like that. So it's just inspiration from the photograph. I suddenly see it could use a horizontal line over here somewhere, and there is, because there is that cast shadow on the photograph, and I keep it a little bit brown over here, but as soon as I get here, I make it more blue. And because here we are in the blue zone, and this was the warmer zone. The side of this vase is a little bit sloppy. So by showing this whole process, I really hope that I can show you that it's just a matter of building, revisiting, building, trying, dare to try, and just look what happens on your canvas and adjust if needed. Is this good or not? I don't think so. Well, it's not that bad either. So I'm gonna add a light over here again, and here is some light, and then of course here we have that stuff. I don't know exactly. Maybe I should make this a little bit more brown. It's just, this is not something that I see on the photograph, but it is what I imagine myself, and I hope that that works a bit. Not sure. I think it does. I think I'd leave it like that. This is a bit what I was looking for over here. So there we go, a green light. We always like green lights. Lighten it up some extra. So there we are. Gonna make a little bit of a slightly lighter color. Okay, now let's head over for the last time to the windows. Do I even want to do that? So let me take a look again. Everything here in this area is darker than it was before, and therefore I think that more attention goes toward here. Yeah, so still it looks light, even though I've made everything darker. I do like it. I think I'll progress with that even more downwards. Now, also, I don't like it that the building stops over there. I don't know what's going on all around here. And so maybe here are also buildings in the darkness. To clarify this form, I want to put a light edge on top of this. So I hope that made sense. That I hope that you saw that if you confidently go on, even though your painting looks ugly, but you keep on building, then a painting slowly but steadily evolves, and that you can very easily make decisions in the end of the painting process when you work from global to specific. Thanks for watching. See you next time.